Hey, Synth. Okay, this is something that I have been doing that I want to offload to you because it's time consuming, and it's also been something that has been blocking um, timely movement of things over to from blue completes, getting those actually into the game. So, basically, what we're looking at here is Blue has finished a number of um, model and texture sets and so forth that are ready to go. Um, but then it takes a little while to actually process those into a form that is ready for you to then process into the final form. And so, as part of that, uh, there is some kind of vetting of making sure that everything looks appropriate. And if you run into situations where that's not the case, something looks off, then you can just kind of bubble that up to my attention. But that almost never happens. And rather than me going through every last one of these directly, we can save some time. So, first of all, what I've been doing lately is just going ahead and putting inside the assets Arc and Bundle models. I've been making a single folder for each um, model or model set. Um, and so uh, for the things that have multiple mark levels that share a texture, basically, those would be a model set. For things that don't share um, textures, those would not be. So in this case, missile turret. Um, and I basically just downloaded this. This is the zip file that Blue provided. And so she's got some stuff in here that she's created. And I'll delete the zip file. Now she made a separate missile file in this particular case, saying, "Hey, you can use this if you want to. This could be helpful," um, which it will be. That'd be great to use as a shot in some other cases. Now, with these textures that she sent, these are giant. And she sent them at full resolution, which is um, really helpful. They're at, I think, 4096 by 4096. We don't actually need that in the game, though. And so we want to um, scale those down. So that's not basically she's sending the highest quality thing, and then it comes down to looking at how we want to reduce it so that it actually gives the best ratio of performance slash quality in the game itself. So now that I've actually loaded up Unity here, we've got our models, and I can see, whoops, actually I had a little turrets folder here that I made. The organization here is frankly arbitrary. I mean, it none of this is referenced directly in the asset bundles or anything. I mean, you see it if you look in the asset bundles, but the references are to the prefabs, and nobody ever sees this stuff. So technically speaking, this is a fairly arbitrary organization. So um, the materials subfolder gets created automatically by Unity when it imports. Say that got created automatically along with all the meta files. When Unity imports the meshes, the FBX files, then it creates the materials for these things. One thing that's handy to do now, it will automatically put those in a subfolder. I find it handy to move that up to the actual folder that has the materials and whatnot in them. And now at this point, you're left with having to figure out what these things map to. Now we've got this odds and ends one, which is I don't see anything called odds and ends in here, which is a bit of an issue, but not a huge one. So when I click on these things, I can see they're at least being read in as 2048 by 2048, but it doesn't really matter. Um, since we're using a standard shader now, this got a bit easier. We just take the, let's do this. First of all, let's drag the missile turret in somewhere that we can see it. Now, it's going to put it somewhere like way over there. We actually want to put this and get this scaled in such a way, we're going to make a prefab out of this, basically. Now, actually, let me back up. The way that I've been doing this is, first of all, okay, so this is the missile turret. So what is that? When I pull up, there's the ship list document. When we look down in here, we've got missile turret, and it's got a C in there right now, which means it's too blue, but it's not been processed yet. Actually, the MLRS turret, that's that one, and the Needler and the Plasma. So that one actually needs to already be shifted to a B, which means she's completely done with it. And the far zoom icon is done as well. And then these other three are ones that I'm sending to you right now. So missile turret has a size of 4. Now this is on the scale of these cubes here, which you can just click in to see which ones. That's the 4 units one. So basically this missile turret is meant to be at the same scale as the MLRS turret. So roughly speaking, these are really rough guidelines. You'll notice that the Corvette obviously sticks out further than that. So it's really just a matter of getting it broadly in that feel. Now, Keith is the one who set these particular scales based on, in general, how prominent he wanted things to be. But when we start talking about how literally they show up in game, there's some wiggle room there. It's not a big deal. That it doesn't correspond to actual game units. It was kind of a rough. Okay, if the fighter is size 1, whatever that means, then the bombers are twice as big as that, roughly, and these things in this row are 4 times as big as that, roughly, and so on. So. But that still gives you a lot of leeway in terms of how you actually set it up. But it's a good starting point. So what I'm going to do is take the turret MLRS, duplicate that with Control D, slide that on over. I've been lining everything up in the rows that are for their particular size scale. One of the things that you will notice is that these two views no longer line up exactly, which can be a little bit frustrating. But the reason for that is that this has a field of view of 40 now, which matches that of the game, versus this is using a field of view of 60. We're using a field of view of 40 in the game so that we have very, very little aperture distortion at the edge of the view. Versus things start getting stretched out looking when you're using a field of view of 60. So that was really noticeable on the planets in particular. Keith brought that to my attention, so I was like, all right, we use a lower field of view and then just change the zooms around. What that means is, though, that since I decided to mimic the field of view here in the working camera, it doesn't match. So. All right, so we've got turret MLRS. We'll call that turret missile. And what you can do is then hit select. That brings you over here to where it is located in the actual folders we care about: assets, arcing bundles, structures, turrets. We're going to go ahead and make a copy of that just by dragging. And again, here in the scene organization stuff, I've made some things like turrets and whatnot, just because this was getting freaking long. So, all right. So now we have turret missile, which is just a copy of turret MLRS. It has an Arkin Visual Script on it here, but we want to go ahead and clear out. Well, I'll let you handle that how you want, I guess. Maybe you. I don't know. You probably. It's up to you. That's up to you. We've got our miss hit thing, and then we've got the actual renderer here. So I'm gonna go ahead and drag. At this point now, we need to go back over to one of the easiest ways to do that is to click the actual mesh on the MLRS one. That brings us to the missile one. And so missile turret, we'll go ahead and drag in here. And so now you can see its location here. Now that's teeny. I'd rather not scale that up. I'd rather have it import larger. So let's go ahead and just select 10 here, roughly. Hit apply. And it redid the materials. That's annoying. Fine. Another way to handle this with the materials is just to take the textures that she provided, just drag them to the materials folder, and then it won't try and recreate things like that. Okay, so we've got our missile turret here. This is pretty similar in size, so we can go ahead and get rid of the MLRS turret renderer here. And now we can kind of say, is this the scale that seems appropriate? And I have no idea yet. We'll find that out later. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Now, these materials, when I start editing these directly, assigning these, you'll see them appear here. So emission, surprise, the normal. One of the things you'll notice is that this immediately complains, hey, this isn't marked as a normal map. Yep, so fix it, and then things will look better. And then the body texture goes to albedo. And all right, so we've started having something. So we're going to want to crank up the metallic some. This is nothing new. Take down the normal some, 0.2, how about? And, all right, fine. We're getting there. Missile rack. Stick that in there. And the albedo in there. And there is no emission texture. Okay, fair enough. Normal map on, so let's crank up the metallic on this. Woo, a lot. All right, maybe down a little bit on that. And then the normals down a little bit. And we're starting to look pretty reasonable. That's interesting. I see. It's looking like that just because we're not doing an HDR glow on this yet. We haven't gone above 1 on the emission. So let's look at the exhaust ports on this thing first as our best example. All right. So yeah, just a little bit and it starts looking more. Yeah, there we go. We're starting to get into a nice color. One of the things I like about this is where when you're looking at it, it has more than one color in it. See, it's got a lot of the reds around the edges. And it just looks, on fire a little bit. So we can look around here on the front of this thing and see these have not lost their definition either. So, and neither has these bits. So that's good. You can click on the emission texture here and see, these are the bits that are lit up. So, all right. This is kind of it, sort of, in terms of getting it looking like it should look in the base LOD0 state, except we have a bunch of materials that are giant, and we have a bunch of pieces that are separate. So now we go into phase 2. So we've got something that phase 1 we've got something that looks the way this should look in a very broad sense. Now let's get it to perform the way that we want it to perform. There are some, individual tweaks and so forth uh, that I might come in and make later. Like this looks all faded out for some reason. It's probably because of uh, the specular highlighting on that, and that's something I can come back in with a metallic map later. And if you would kind of bubble up concerns that you have about, that doesn't really seem, something's getting washed out or, whatever, then if you see any of those sort of things, that'll help me n- know that there's something to target. I'm gonna come look at everything anyway, but um, save me time. Okay. Now she actually made a simpler missile, single missile thing. So this has the whole rack. That's interesting. So this individual missile. All right. So this thing's it's got an entire rack, no matter what. Rack 2. Yeah. So there's nothing that has just the missile. So that makes this one not actually useful. So we'll just delete that. Not a big deal. Okay, so back to here. Back to here specifically. Now, we have to consider if there's any parts of this that we're going to want to have moving. And, ooh, look at this. These missiles are standalone. This is what I wanted. So we're actually going to take this and drag that off over here. This right here is a projectile for us that we will put into the shots folder. So we will treat this thing by itself. So on this, we'll do fix all mesh renderers, not set all materials to default, but remove all junk. And so it's turned off casting and receiving shadows, yada, yada, yada. And it's still using the same material as the other thing. So great. This thing should be scaled, perfectly to what it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's take this down here into shots. This is a rare occurrence that we actually have one of these, but so we'll say missile, and we'll drag this down here with red ball shot. At this point, we've got the Arkin visual other object script, which I can just paste on here. And it's type shot, yeah. And layer shots. And boom. And now at this point, we now have a new thing that can be used in the AI War 2 goodie box once we hit save all assets. So hooray, we've got another shot. That's extremely rare. If there's something that's the first time that's happened where there was something I wanted to explicitly pull off. But then there's the question of, okay, well, is there anything that I want to have like rotate or like waggle back and forth or something? And with most ships, the answer is no. With things that have obvious rotational components to them, then sometimes the answer is yes. If again, that's something you can kind of bring up as a question, but I'll try and make a note of that for any particular line items. So what we want to do first at this point, as part of phase 2, is we want to go in here and look at all these materials, which this is exactly how it should be coming out of Maya. Like Blue's done everything right. This is just the post-processing that has to happen with any model that somebody's going to be making in Maya. This is not some sort of, we're not compensating for anything. This is just part of the process. Okay, so at this point now, we're going to bring these things, the actual PNGs, into Photoshop, which is why I wanted you to get Photoshop Elements. So you can see these things, if you go to canvas size, they're 4096 in size. What we want them to be in the case of something small like this is 1024. And then it will size that down. You just hit save and it does its thing. Since I have full Photoshop, I'm able to kind of bypass this some, and I've made some actions that, oops, not that. New, yeah. I've made some things that let me shortcut it, but you'll have to do them one by one. But that gives you a chance to kind of look at them anyway. Okay, so now it re-imports them. For the emission, you're going to change that to make sure it does not import the alpha. You'll see right now it's 1024 by 1024 sRGB, RGB compression, DXT1, 0.7 megabytes. When we change this to have alpha source none, hit apply, we should see this reduced. No, it's already as reduced as it's going to get, so never mind. The normals are being imported as normal maps. We saw that because we corrected that when it was, we hit the fix when we were using that as part of the material here. So no big deal. On these body textures, these things are DXT1 as well, which we really don't want. We're going to hit none, and we're going to hit high quality on this, which then when we hit apply, this will change it to BC7. It's good to go on and size these down before you do that, because the import process can take quite a while if you let it. So now we've got our wonderful BC7 stuff, and you'll notice that the quality is much, much higher. When there were things that were looking a little off, and even now that we're using a quarter the size of texture, this looks much better. So, okay, now we have our materials the way we want, and so now it's time to combine. What we're going to do is we're going to merge this all into one object. I don't want to have two sets of materials. I only want one. And I don't care about having the animator and all this other junk on here right now because we're not going to keep this object. So I've selected the object itself, the actual root of all the various meshes. I have not selected the thing that has the visual ship. That's an important distinction. So I go under Windows, and I'm going to go to Pro Draw Call Optimizer. Now, what you're going to want to do is add selected and children. That pulls in huh. Still got. Okay, right. So first of all, we got this odds and ends thing. Let's see where that's used. I was going to mention that before, and so we've got this odds and ends thing. What is being used here? So we've got body. Odds and ends, pipe 2. What is this? So this thing. Okay. So there's some things that accidentally got left in here from the look of it. Pipe 1, pipe 2, these need to come out. So we'll delete those. What's this thing? Barrel. Barrel is using odds and ends. Antenna is using the proper stuff. So, okay. So those were little extra dealies that just got left in by accident. So, and we should be able to delete odds and ends here. All right, so let's clear objects, come back over here, add selected in children. Okay, so okay, at this point, it's got these are shader variants of the emission. This one is using standard opaque. I don't know what my bum. Oh, bump mapped. I guess that means it's using my. I'm not sure what that's standing for. I guess it's standing for using the albedo. And then this one's using dash emission. This one is not. So what we're going to want to do, these won't combine this way. So that's no good. The reason is Unity will automatically create variants of even its standard texture shader here based off what you actually use from it, which is handy. Then it doesn't wind up using stuff that's not needed. Now, what we're going to want to do here is select an emission map and let's see if we can just find. Is there anything? It's just pure black. Looks like it. So laser impulse impact black. And emission, leave that at 1, whatever. Go ahead and remember what your emission was here, 1.69. That's basically 1.7. Just make it 1.7 to be safe. All right, so heck, we can just copy this over to here so that it's the same across both. Now, when we select this and hit, not that, we select this and hit add selected in children, you'll notice that now everything is under 1. There's a not optimizable, which shows there's no mesh filter or mesh renderer. That's fine. That's actually referring to this root object, and there will be some like that. Those are just interior objects that don't have a mesh. That's fine. Now, at this point, we've got something where it's going to create an atlas out of all of these different things, which are using 2 different. They're using one shader, and it doesn't matter how many textures they have in there. And we say, now for one, it would just atlas that and combine them, remap basically the meshes to point to that. We want to combine the meshes as well because I don't want all these little sub meshes. This is exactly how Blue should have been doing it in Maya. She did exactly the right thing. And as you can see already from the fact that I pulled out a missile, it's super useful to be able to do that. And we keep the originals that are more flexible so that if we need to make changes later, we can. So having those originals, basically the way that Blue sent them to me, which I then pass on to you at this point, that's super important. But for game purposes, we go with a scaled down version. So we are going to hit combine all. Now we're going to hit bake atlas, and it's going to process the shader itself and create something new. And the atlas size that it's creating is estimating is going to be 1448 by 1448, plus or minus 2.5%. That's funny. All right, so now we have this. It's going to look a little wrong, and that's fine. What it's done is it's created this thing here, combined 0 standard blah, 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 blah. We don't care. And this, the fact that there is a blank object here in the mesh filter, okay, so you can see how big it is. That's fine. The fact that there's a blank object there tells you that this is an instance mesh that exists only in the scene and therefore can't be in a prefab. However, the atlas that it's created, it put in this temporary folder under scale examples atlas. And so let's go ahead and grab these, and we will bring these over to our missile turret folder, and we can delete that folder here. Now in the missile turret folder, now we have these four guys. Now I'm going to drag this missile named thing back up into the turret missile. I'm going to go ahead and let's at least just turn off the original. Oh, it's already hidden, which is fine, which is good. And so we'll call this missile turret renderer. Why not? So this is our thing. It has some issues. One of which is that the normal map is not marked as a normal map. So we hit fix now on that. That corrects a whole bunch of things. You'll notice that the normal map thing that we'd set at 0.2 didn't get saved. There's a few other things here. So let's see. We had 0.746 on the metallic. 0.5 was already there. The emission should be, was at 1.7 basically. And so now this should be exactly what it was before. By the way, it unflagged these as being normal maps. So now these ones are messed up, but it doesn't care. I don't care. We're going to delete them anyway. So all that interesting. I had done a different amount for the missile rack. That's right. I forgot. Oh well. Let's adjust. That's why the missiles are looking extra shiny here. Let's adjust the metallic up a little bit here. This is one thing I can come in later and adjust with a metalness map. Doesn't make any difference. But kind of turn that down a little bit, and what do you know, this has actually kind of fixed itself. So just tweaking this around has kind of fixed it up some, which is nice. We might be able to turn the normals down a little more even. It's a little much, because rarely is somebody going to be that close in. So hooray, we've got a mesh that looks like it should. So at this point, we can go ahead and delete the actual original materials, delete the actual original mesh. And real quick, let's go ahead and do our mesh simplify. And you have to hit compute mesh so that it will actually give you a mesh at all. It has to do that in order to analyze it, but we're leaving the vertex count at 100% because we're not actually trying to simplify it right now. Just want to save it. So enable prefab usage, Arcing bundle, models, turrets, missile turret, and missile turret renderer. We'll call it. Save. Now the renderer actually has a name and it is referencing this. So hooray. We can delete this object tree, which was the original thing. By the way, now I can hit fix all mesh renderers on this and remove all junk, which will also get rid of the mesh renderer itself. Hooray. We can go ahead and hit apply to keep prefab on there. Now we don't want this as the name. So we'll do missile turret. Let's just call that missile turret as the mesh. Missile turret here for the material. This is the missile turret diffuse or albedo, so just call it missile turret underscore diffuse, whatever, diff. It doesn't really matter. Normally I'm a stickler for consistency, but this just really doesn't matter. Okay. Now, those have been named in ways that are a little more palatable. That way we're not having like Atlas 1 like all over the place. If we do a search for Atlas and stuff, we don't come up with like a million examples of that. We actually do have that in the ARC, of course. Naturally, I accidentally left that on the ARC of all things. Although actually, ARC body, what do you know? I only left it on the material, so it's really not a big deal because I'm not renaming textures not the best because once those have been checked in, because that then wastes a bunch of space. But a material is like a couple of kilobytes, so why not? All right, so let's get back over here. These things all look good. Oh, nope, they don't. Because for the, we kind of do that again, setting this to high quality, don't import the texture alpha, putting this back to BC7. And you'll see that doubled the size of it. In this one, let's see if this makes any difference whatsoever. It doesn't, but eh. Okay, so now we have this thing. And in terms of a full quality model with no vertices being removed, we're done. And if you go to Show in Explorer here, you'll see that this missile turret.asset is no longer an FBX file, it's a .asset file. It's over a meg in size. And that's just a lot of vertices in general. Go ahead and, we'll keep that, we'll check that in, because we're now at a point where we might say, okay, we might need to revert to this to fix something up at some point in the future, conceivably. And this is a good stopping point in terms of that. Like, it looks correct, it has Atlas textures, it's got the full quality mesh. This would be a good point to go back and correct something later if we needed to, versus having to go all the way back to the start to Blue's originals where things aren't Atlas and all that other stuff hasn't happened yet. So we'll leave alone the actual original missile turret full quality thing. We'll just go into Mesh Simplify here though, and we'll try something like 60. Let's see what happens. This thing has so many vertices on it that we can probably go a fair bit down without it really affecting things. So, okay, so that caused some extra rounding to happen. Ooh, we lost some. We call it that. We actually lost some edges there. That's interesting. Let's not say use curvature. Okay, so this looks a lot more like the original. I think we are still losing some. Yeah, we're still losing some sides there. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I'm also not really a fan of that. Let's try taking out keep borders, because usually the edge length, I think, will be enough for that. Yeah, that's closer. All right, so we're just gonna have to up this some. You can see that that was at 13,000. Gosh, are you kidding me? This thing wants to kill those like immediately. It's like the first thing it wants to kill, apparently. That's super annoying. So, yeah, I mean, that's messed up. Wonder what happens if we don't do protect texture. It's probably going to really mess it up, though. Not as bad as I thought it would be. Let's try keep borders and not use edge length. That may make a difference on these. This is probably going to mingle other parts of it. So you can really, I mean, you already know that this is kind of a guess and check operation when it comes to doing the simplifying. But when you're trying to do a quote full quality, like an LOD level simplification, yeah. Let's try using the curvature then. Hey, look at that. Okay, so in this particular case, uh, but it's, what is that thing? Like, the heck? Let's try an even 50%. Let's see if that fixes that. You never know. It does weird things sometimes. No, that makes it much, much worse. Uh-huh, yeah. That's ridiculous. Seriously? Yeah. Um, so let's keep everything on and just aggressively optimize and see what it does. Yeah. So I mean, we wind up losing those little side pieces, kind of no matter what it looks like. So I think it was taking off those two things and go to 50%. It likes to be a lower vertex count because that only went down to 14 to 86, and so um, aside from those tiny little missing things on the side, which you only notice if you know that they're supposed to be there, and people are going to be seeing this from the top down in general. Now it's a judgment call of, ooh, yikes, we've got some bit of mangledness there. Darn. Let's turn back. Oh, actually, let's just go to 60% on this. I bet that solves this. This is the sort of, oh Lord, that's no good. All right, back to 50. Keep borders. See what happens. That'll probably kick us into the 14s, I'm betting. That's the sort of thing that people will notice is wrong, even if they don't know to look for something. Darn it, darn it, darn it. Those things are so curved that possibly keeping the curvature is important on this. It's kind of a black box algorithm. Okay, yeah. So, yep, back into the 14s. This is now looking more correct. Things are looking good. Preview the original. So you can see there's a definite difference. Um, and if Blue was watching this, I think she would be going, my beautiful model, which is understandable. But, and she's modeling reasonably low poly, but this thing has so many tiny little parts that this is actually kind of a case where we're having to be a little more aggressive than I normally would be on the optimization, because all those little parts add up. Those are individually low poly, but all those little meshes just add up. So on LOD1, you're going to have to be fairly rough on this. LOD0, I think this is as good as we can get. So Arc and Bundle, models, turret, missile turret, and I'm going to call this LOD0. And so then we can do just remove all junk to get that off there, hit apply. And so our non-LOD0 version, we're not ever actually even using. And when I look at this, LOD0, so 839. So I mean, we've saved some decent space. And for somebody on a weaker graphics card, I mean, this will help out a fair bit. And people are going to be seeing this from here. So those little tiny things that were noticeable. I mean, somebody's going to be seeing it at this level at most to see LOD0, and your LOD1 and stuff can go from there. So okay, at this point now, we'll check out what there is to check in, see what there is to check in. Right, I renamed this thing, which is fine. So now we have, yeah, I renamed it to that. Interestingly, it modified this meta for the laser impulse impact black thing because I was using that. So we'll hit revert on that one. And then we've got the missile turret folder, the missile turret material and diffuse stuff and normal and all that. Missile turret prefab. Oh yeah, that's the shots one, and then we have the structures one. One thing I forgot to do is come in here, make sure this is actually included in the goodie box. Learned yesterday with Keith that making a duplicate like that doesn't keep the fact that it's in the goodie box. So, all right, try that again. And at this point, everything looks good. So that would be missile turret ready for LOD setup. So this is the point at which I was handing things to you in the past, where I'd gone through all of this part, and it's like, okay, now off to the races with the LEDs, yeah. So now I'm going to hand it to you at this point. So that commonly was taking me 30 plus minutes, and that's likely to be the case. I don't think there's a whole lot of time that can be shaved off in this, just because there's a lot of little fiddling and stuff. So if there are any kind of quality questions with something where it's like, XYZ part of this really should be more matte than everything else, and I just can't get it so that it looks nice and metallic on one part but nice and matte on another, that's a case where I'm going to need to create a metalness map. And just let me know after the fact, after you're done with it to this point, and I can come in and do that and make any final tweaks. And if there's something wrong with the emission on some part of it or something, then let me know as well, and I can come in and do that. But I can do that on it after it's already been atlased and combined. I don't need that sooner than. If there is something where I need to adjust emission in particular, somewhat also metalness, let me know and let me do that prior to you starting the LOD work, if you would. So, all right. Thanks for watching.